science fiction or the iconic cultural reach of Mark Twain. But the correct answer belongs to a woman writing in the late 19th and early 20th centuries named Ellen G. White. This chart compares her global footprint to those traditional literary figures. It shows the sheer volume of her work, over 100,000 pages of text produced in her lifetime, with translations eventually spanning more than 160 different languages. What makes that volume especially striking is her subject matter. She didn't write sweeping fictional epics. Her entire catalog focused almost entirely on a single goal, exalting the life of Jesus, and pointing readers towards Scripture as the basis of their faith. That presents a curious mechanical problem. Translating ancient, complex spiritual doctrines across cultural boundaries is notoriously difficult. Yet a writer dedicated exclusively to these subjects achieved a level of global distribution that easily outpaces popular fiction. Communicating the events of the divine, topics involving vast theological weight and sacred history, comes with an inherent friction. Capturing that infinite scale for an everyday reader is a significant writing challenge. For centuries, the standard approach was to match the majesty of the subject with the majesty of the prose. Theologians and scholars used highly elevated, eloquent, and dense language, relying on the pen of the learned to express their faith. But this approach often created an unintended consequence. By adding so much artificial embellishment and human coloring, writers inadvertently built a wall around the text, making it largely inaccessible to everyday people who lacked formal theological training. Furthermore, that kind of complex, highly stylized rhetoric relies heavily on specific cultural idioms. It does not travel well. When translators try to port dense Victorian prose into entirely different languages and cultural contexts, the meaning often degrades. By attempting to scale their language up to meet the majesty of the divine, traditional religious writers restricted their own global reach, alienating the exact masses they were trying to connect with. Ellen G. White took the exact opposite approach. In the preface to her book, The Story of Jesus, her framework offers a highly functional alternative. She recognized that the narrative of Jesus already held immense emotional weight. It didn't need to be propped up by eloquent vocabulary. The story, as her preface notes, shines brightest in its own luster. This led to a strict editorial rule. Absolutely no effort would be made toward artificial embellishment. She stripped away the dense theological jargon entirely. Instead of scaling her prose up to capture the loftiness of heaven, she deliberately scaled the language down to meet the everyday reality of human beings. Removing the complex vocabulary did not dilute the sacred history. It served as a calculated editorial decision to ensure the narrative remained clear and accessible across different readerships. To execute this, the book was specifically written with a precise target audience in mind, the young. By adapting childlike language, she imposed a rigid constraint on the text. The writing was forced to abandon abstract theory and focus purely on direct narrative action and foundational human emotion. This timeline maps out the massive chronological scope she tackled using this simple framework. It tracks the entire arc of the narrative, moving from the birth and baptism through the intense moments of Gethsemane and Calvary, all the way to the Ascension. By anchoring these massive milestones with plain vocabulary, she created a direct bridge. Those monumental spiritual events became directly mapped onto everyday, relatable human experiences, like family dynamics, deep conflict, suffering, and hope. Writing for a child's perspective functions as an effective bridge. It allows a writer to connect heaven and earth without losing the reader in the weeds of theological abstraction. This structural simplicity brings us right back to her reach into more than 160 languages. This network map illustrates the mechanical advantage of her approach. Because she avoided thick, culturally specific idioms and complex phrasing, the source text became inherently modular. Translators could easily take the central hub of simple syntax and branch it out into dozens of global languages. The plainness of the writing acted as a universal linguistic passport, allowing the ideas to cross borders that traditional academic theology simply couldn't penetrate. While academic contemporaries produced work confined to specialized seminaries, White's direct approach enabled massive physical distribution across the globe. For global communication, radical simplicity functions as a practical lever. Ellen G. White's literary achievement proves a counterintuitive point. Deep, complex spiritual truths do not actually require complex structural frameworks to be fully understood. In fact, the deepest connections between humanity and the divine are often best articulated through pure, unvarnished relatability. By deliberately choosing plain text over ornate eloquence, she bypassed the cultural, linguistic, and generational barriers that normally trap religious texts. Her enduring worldwide legacy rests on tapping into a universal human desire to encounter matters of faith directly, without an academic filter. No matter a reader's background or location, the most effective way to communicate infinite truth is to meet the desire expressed in the familiar hymn, to simply tell the story.
Brothers and sisters, please do a small favor. Make sure to like the video and write a lovely comment. Keep Sujan alive!